I was still half asleep when the pounding started. The kind of pounding that doesn't just hit the door, it hits your chest. At first, I honestly thought I was dreaming. The sun wasn't even up yet. The house still wrapped in that soft morning quiet, and for a second I wondered if maybe a branch had fallen or some animal had crashed into the porch. But then it came again, harder, louder, violent enough that the frame rattled and the picture on the hallway wall tilted sideways. I stumbled forward, still in yesterday's shirt, my mind trying to catch up with my body. My wife had just stepped out of the hallway, tying her hair back, calm as always. She looked more awake than I felt, and somehow that made the moment feel even stranger. Nobody knocks like that at dawn. Nobody with good intentions. When I opened the door, even with the chain still on, the cold air rushed in, and with it, a sight that didn't make sense at first. 4 people stood on my porch wearing dark, tactical clothes, fake-looking vests, and cheap badges that gleamed too brightly in the early light. But it wasn't them who made my stomach drop. It was the person standing in front of them, the HOA president. She wasn't smiling today. She wasn't pretending to be polite or neighborly. Her face was stiff, cold, almost rehearsed. "Your wife is under arrest," she announced, like she believed she had the authority to say those words. "She needs to come out immediately." For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. This was our home, our quiet cul-de-sac, not some crime movie scene. And yet here she was, flanked by strangers with holsters on their hips, acting like she ran the county. My wife stepped beside me, her voice steady as a steel beam. "Do you have a warrant?" The HOA president blinked, thrown off for only a moment, then tried to regain her posture. Community enforcement doesn't require paperwork for emergency violations. Emergency violations. At 6 in the morning, with armed men on my porch. One of the fake officers shifted from foot to foot, looking down the street as if hoping nobody was watching. But someone was. I spotted blinds shifting, a window crack opening. Our neighbors were awake now, quietly witnessing something they didn't understand. My wife didn't move. Her calmness wasn't normal calm, it was practiced, controlled, almost unnerving. I didn't understand it then, not fully. But I saw something in her eyes, something I couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. The kind of clarity a person has when they already know how this is going to end. The HOA president stepped closer, trying to push the door open with the authority she wished she had. "Step aside," she said. "We can handle this the easy way or the hard way." But before I could respond, my wife gently touched my arm. "Go call the sheriff's office," she said, her eyes still locked on the president's. "Tell them we have 4 impersonators at our door." Impersonators. The word hung in the air like a spark waiting for fuel. The HOA president's face twisted, frustration breaking through her false confidence. "You're making a mistake you won't recover from," she warned. But even then, even in that tense, breathless moment, I had a feeling she wasn't talking to just me. She was talking to both of us. And I had no idea how right she was. Because that morning wasn't the start of an argument. It was the start of a war. We came to this neighborhood for peace, but the truth? Peace was the first lie we were told. Back when we first moved to Oakwood Heights, I thought I'd finally found the one place on earth where my shoulders could relax. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes until dusk. It felt like stepping into a calmer version of my own childhood. The kind of place where you greet people by name, and nobody has a reason to look over their shoulder. I still remember carrying the first box up the driveway, breathing in that warm, clean air, hearing nothing but the rustle of trees and the distant sound of a sprinkler. My wife walked beside me, smiling in that rare, soft way she used to when she felt safe. We had spent years in the city, years dealing with noise and traffic and walls that shook every time a truck went by. Here, everything felt slow, simple, right. And that's when we met her, the HOA president. She walked over with a bright smile, a welcome basket, and the kind of friendly warmth you don't expect from someone in charge of neighborhood rules. She praised our home, complimented the landscaping, even helped me lift a heavy tool chest into the garage. She laughed easily, listened closely, and acted like she was genuinely happy we'd moved in. Looking back, I wonder how much of that was real. How much of it was a performance? But in those early weeks, I didn't question anything. I was just grateful. My wife set up a small work area in the backyard where she exercised, took calls, and spent quiet mornings under the shade. I started tinkering with small home projects, fixing shelves, planting shrubs, planning upgrades. Every evening we'd walk around the neighborhood loop, waving to people on their porches. It all felt effortless, natural, the kind of peace you want to hold on to with both hands. Then came the fence project. Our old wooden one was rotting, leaning, and honestly falling apart. So we applied for every permit, checked every rule, confirmed the measurements twice. Everything was perfectly legal. The contractor arrived right on schedule, and I remember thinking how good it would feel once the new iron fence stood solid between us and the street. But the day construction started, the HOA president's smile faded, slowly at first, then all at once. She appeared outside more often, watching the workers with her arms crossed. The neighbors, who used to wave eagerly, now paused or turned away, entirely. Conversations stopped when we approached. Greetings shrank into stiff nods. It was like someone had flipped a switch in the entire community. I tried to ignore it until the morning I opened the mailbox and found the envelope. Heavy paper, official-looking letterhead, the kind of thing meant to intimidate you before you even read a single word. Inside was a notice accusing us of violating HOA aesthetic rules and threatening daily fines. My chest tightened as I read it, not because we had done anything wrong, but because something about it felt off. Too aggressive, too sudden, too personal. My wife looked at it, shook her head once, and said, "Call the firm." So I did, and the moment the receptionist said, "Sir, we never sent that," something inside me went cold, because forged legal paperwork doesn't happen by accident. Someone had created it, deliberately, carefully, to pressure us, scare us, or force us into something we didn't yet understand. That was the moment I realized the peace we thought we'd found wasn't peace at all. It was bait, and we had already taken it. The day she smiled at me, I trusted her. The day she accused my wife publicly, I knew we were in trouble. After the forged letter incident, my wife didn't waste a second. She held the paper up to the light, tracing the edges with her thumb the way someone handles something poisonous. "This isn't just illegal," she said. "It's intentional. Someone wants us nervous." She didn't raise her voice or panic. She didn't need to. Her certainty alone told me everything. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. Over the next few days, the neighborhood began to shift in ways that made my stomach twist. People who used to wave from their yards now crossed the street to avoid us entirely. Conversations died the moment we stepped near. A few acted like they didn't even recognize us. It wasn't natural silence, it was planned distance. Rumors move fast on quiet streets, and whatever the HOA president was spreading, people were believing it. Then the notes started. At first, they were almost polite. Little messages tucked under our wiper blades or taped to the fence. "Please cooperate with community standards. Let's keep our neighborhood safe." But they escalated quickly. "Some people don't belong here. Your fence is hiding something. Hope the truth comes out soon." Different handwriting, different paper, same message. We weren't welcome anymore. My wife kept each note in a plastic bag, filing them away silently. But the more she organized the evidence, the heavier the pit in my stomach grew. I felt humiliated walking down my own street, like every pair of eyes carried judgment or fear. And beneath that humiliation was anger. A deep, burning anger I didn't know what to do with. Then came the sidewalk meeting. It was a Saturday afternoon. The sun was bright, kids were playing down the block, and out of nowhere, the HOA president dragged a folding chair to the strip of grass across from our driveway. One chair turned into 5, then 10, as neighbors gathered at her invitation. I didn't know the meeting was about us until I heard her voice echo across the pavement. "I'm not trying to alarm anyone," she began, standing in front of the unfinished fence like it was evidence of a crime. "But this structure blocks visibility from the street. It creates blind spots, and we all know what that can hide." My wife stood beside me inside our living room, arms crossed, face unreadable. The HOA president continued, her tone shifting into something more dramatic. "I've done some digging," she announced, "and our new neighbor's job, well, it's secretive, classified, and we don't know what kind of risk that brings to our community." A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear, confusion, curiosity. My cheeks burned. My fists tightened. Who gave her the right to reveal anything about us? Who told her she could stand in front of our neighbors and twist innocence into suspicion? Beside me, my wife didn't react, not visibly. But her eyes changed. They sharpened, focused, calculating something quietly beneath the surface. She didn't look shaken. She looked ready. When the crowd finally dispersed, she turned to me and said in a voice so calm it felt colder than anger, "She just crossed a line she can't uncross." I believed her. But I didn't understand yet how far that line would stretch. Because that night, when I took out the trash, I saw the HOA president again, standing across the street, motionless, watching our house. And that was only the beginning. At 2 a.m., the power dropped, and when I looked outside, they were already in my yard. The house went dark so suddenly it felt like the air was sucked out of it. 1 second I was half asleep, drifting in and out of dreams, and the next I was staring into a pitch-black room with my heart racing. The hum of the AC stopped. The clock on the nightstand died. Even the streetlights outside went quiet. For a moment I didn't understand what woke me. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, steady, deliberate. I moved toward the window, careful not to stumble into anything, and pulled the curtain back just an inch. A thin beam of white light swept across our backyard like someone searching for something, or someone. Then another light. And another. 4 moving flashlights, 4 bodies in tactical clothes creeping through our property like they belonged there. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't an accident. They had cut the power on purpose. I hurried down the stairs, each step feeling too loud against the wooden floor. My wife was already awake, more than awake. She stood at the bottom of the staircase fully dressed, calm, alert, as if she'd been expecting this. I didn't know how long she'd been standing there. Before I could speak, the knock came. Not a knock, an announcement. 3 booming hits against the front door that shook the hinges. "Midnight, HOA safety inspection," a voice shouted. "Open up immediately." I felt anger twist inside me. They weren't even trying to sound professional, just loud, intimidating. My wife approached the door with no fear whatsoever. I followed her, every muscle tight, every breath shallow. She flicked the porch light switch, but of course nothing happened. The power was still dead. Instead, the flashlights outside cast shaky shadows across the walls. When she opened the door, just an inch, the scene on our porch made my skin crawl. There they were, the HOA president standing front and center, dressed in dark tactical gear like some untrained imitation of law enforcement. Behind her, the same fake team from before, lined up in formation, pretending to be something they weren't. "This is an emergency community inspection," the HOA president declared, her voice sharp with false authority. "We have the right to enter your property immediately." My wife didn't even blink. "Show me the law that gives you that right. You don't get to ask questions," the president snapped. "This neighborhood is under my jurisdiction tonight." Jurisdiction. Hearing her say that word made something inside me boil. This wasn't just harassment anymore. She was fully impersonating law enforcement, and she believed she could get away with it. My wife stepped forward, her voice low and steady. "If you or any of these people cross this threshold without a warrant, you'll be trespassing. And you will be arrested." There was no shake in her voice, no hesitation, just control. As she spoke, the porch light caught on something metallic near her collar. A small glint. A shape. A badge? My breath caught. What was she hiding from me? The HOA president looked thrown off, even if only for a second. Her team shuffled behind her, suddenly unsure. But my mind wasn't on them anymore. It was on my wife. The calm. The authority. The badge-shaped glint I wasn't supposed to see. And before I could stop myself, the question slipped out. Who are you really? She didn't answer. Not yet. And that silence was more terrifying than anything waiting outside our door. I thought I knew the woman I married, until she told me a truth that changed everything. After the HOA president and her fake team finally backed off, the house felt heavier than before. Not quiet. Heavy, like the walls were holding their breath with us. My wife locked the door, checked it twice, then walked toward the kitchen without saying a word. She moved with a kind of focus that made me follow her automatically, like I was caught in the pull of something I didn't understand. She turned on a small battery-powered lantern and set it on the counter. The warm glow softened the room, but nothing could soften the knot in my chest. I stood there waiting, half expecting her to deny everything I'd seen on the porch. The badge glint, the confidence, the authority. Instead, she took a slow breath and said, "Sit down." That alone made my stomach tighten. I lowered myself into the chair. She stayed standing, hands flat on the counter, eyes fixed on me with a calm I had never seen before. Not even during the worst moments of our life together. That calm wasn't just confidence. It was command. "I owe you the truth," she said. "All of it." Then she told me. "My name is Sarah Walker, and I'm the elected sheriff of this county." I stared at her. Not because I didn't believe her. Her voice didn't allow disbelief. But because the reality of her words didn't match the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't dramatic. She said it like she'd been waiting years to finally take the weight off her chest. "I didn't tell you because my position comes with enemies," she continued. "People who target families to get to the person wearing the badge. The less people know about where I live, the safer it is for both of us." It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't betrayal. It was shock layered with sudden understanding. All the little things, her awareness, her posture, the way she always scanned a room without looking like she was scanning anything. I had married a protector, and I hadn't even realized how deep that role went. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small device, a digital recorder. "I had this running the entire time," she said. "Every word she and her fake officers said is on here." She pressed play for just a second, long enough for me to hear the HOA president's voice demanding entry and using fake authority. Then she turned it off. "That," she said firmly, "is evidence." She walked through everything the HOA president did that night. Impersonating law enforcement, trespassing, attempting forced entry, threatening citizens, cutting power to facilitate intimidation. Crimes stacked like bricks. She explained how impersonation is a felony under state law, how recorded audio is admissible because our state only requires one-party consent, how surveillance of our own property is legally protected. Her tone wasn't emotional anymore. It was precise, professional, sharp. She wasn't my wife in that moment. She was the sheriff. "This isn't harassment anymore," she said. "It's criminal, and I'm opening a case." The fear I'd been carrying slowly shifted into something else. Relief mixed with awe. For the first time, I realized the HOA president had no idea who she was provoking. She thought she was bullying a quiet couple with no power. She didn't know she was attacking the one person in the county trained to handle people like her. My wife picked up the recorder, held it up, and said quietly, "And she isn't who she says she is." She looked me dead in the eyes. "I can prove it." And that was the moment I knew our fight had only just begun. We searched her name and found nothing. No past, no records, no real identity. Who was she? The morning after the fake midnight inspection, the house was still quiet, but this time it wasn't peaceful, it was waiting. My wife sat at the dining table with her laptop open, fingers moving with purpose across the keys. She wasn't guessing or hoping. She was hunting. I stood behind her, arms crossed, trying to steady my breath while she accessed databases the average person would never even know existed. Official systems. Sheriff's office tools. Real sources. Not the kind of background check someone buys online. "Let's start with her name," she said. She typed it in. Our HOA president's full name, spelled exactly as she'd written it on community emails. Nothing came up. Not a job record. Not a school history. Not even a legitimate address outside our neighborhood. My wife frowned slightly, the kind of frown she gets when something is wrong at a level deeper than the obvious. "Nobody's this clean," she murmured. "Not unless they're hiding something." She tried again with every variation she could think of. Still nothing. Then she pulled up a county property database and entered the address of the HOA president's home. This time something appeared. A name. A different name. A name we had never heard. "That's her real identity," my wife said quietly. She typed it into the law enforcement database. The results loaded slowly, and as each line appeared, my skin crawled. Arrests. Not one. Several. Across multiple states. Impersonating a police officer. Harassment. Filing false reports. Organizing intimidation groups. It didn't stop there. My wife scrolled down further and uncovered a pattern stretching across state lines. A trail of neighborhoods where this woman had joined HOAs, risen to power, fabricated authority, and terrorized families until they either sold their homes or fled. I felt sick. This wasn't an HOA dispute. This was a practiced operation. My wife didn't react with shock. She reacted with certainty, like this confirmed something she already suspected. "She's part of a fraud model," she explained. "There are groups that use HOAs to push families out, especially ones they think they can pressure. Then someone swoops in, buys the home cheap, and flips it for profit." She clicked another file. A business database opened. There it was. A tie between our HOA president's real identity and a man my wife recognized. A known real estate scammer who had been investigated before but always slipped away through loopholes and shell companies. "She's working for him," my wife said. "Or with him. Either way, we were chosen, not stumbled upon." Chosen. The word made me feel cold. I thought back to the fence, the strange stares, the rumors, the forged letter, the midnight trespass. None of it was random. None of it was about a fence. We were targeted from the start. My wife stood up, grabbed a small case from the hallway cabinet, and opened it on the table. Inside were 3 compact surveillance devices. Night vision, motion activated, professional grade. "How long have you had those?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Long enough?" Within an hour they were installed. One in the tree line facing the street, one beneath the roof eave, one near the backyard gate. She showed me the monitors, how they recorded, how they sent alerts. Then she turned to me, eyes sharp with a calm certainty that almost scared me more than the danger we were facing. "Now," she said, closing the laptop with finality, "we set the trap." And suddenly I understood. We were no longer the hunted. We were becoming the hunters. To stop her, we had to let her get closer. Closer than any sane neighbor would ever allow. Once the surveillance cameras were in place and the truth about her identity was exposed, my wife didn't hesitate. She didn't hide. She didn't retreat. She stepped forward with a calm strategy that felt both terrifying and brilliant. "She's watching us," my wife said. "So let's give her something to watch." She opened the HOA group chat, the same one where neighbors usually shared lost pets or reminders about trash pickup. But this time, my wife typed a short message with deliberate vagueness. "Small update. County training equipment may be delivered to our driveway this week. Nothing alarming. Please ignore any late-night activity." No details, no explanations. Just enough to draw the HOA president like a moth to a flame. And it worked faster than I expected. Within hours, the front camera picked up movement. Our HOA president loitering near the edge of our lawn. pretending to walk her dog even though the leash was empty. She wasn't subtle. She lingered, peered toward our windows, pretended to adjust her phone while clearly taking photos. Later that same night, another camera caught her creeping closer, stepping onto our property, flashlight in hand, recording our garage door and windows. Her movements were practiced, like she'd done this to other families before. My wife watched the footage with a steady expression. "Good," she murmured. "She's chasing the bait." But the real trap came next. My wife printed a fabricated document, a fake training inventory file with official-looking seals and codes. Nothing sensitive or dangerous, but convincing enough to intrigue someone desperate for leverage. She placed it near the living room window, angled perfectly so anyone snooping outside could spot it. I didn't think it would work that fast. But the very next morning, one of our cameras caught the president slipping up to our window before sunrise. She angled her phone through the glass, snapped photos, then scanned the room like she expected someone to catch her. When she didn't see us, she took a step further, opened our mailbox, reached in, and pulled out the decoy envelope my wife had planted there. She stole it, just like my wife predicted. But the moment that truly made my chest tighten came later that afternoon. A dark SUV rolled slowly down our street. Not a neighbor, not a delivery truck, something else. It stopped right in front of the HOA president's house. She came outside immediately, too quickly, like she'd been waiting for them. She leaned into the passenger window and handed something inside. My wife zoomed in on the license plate through the camera system and whispered, "That's him, the ringleader." I felt my pulse thump against my ribs. This wasn't just local harassment. This was organized, coordinated, deep. My wife documented everything: screenshots, audio, video, timestamps. Each piece became part of a file she labeled Mitchell Operation, using the HOA president's real last name. When she finally closed the folder, she didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. "We're ready," she said. "She's building her case. Now we'll build ours." But before we could take the next step, a new notification hit my phone. A message posted in the HOA chat. "Emergency neighborhood meeting tomorrow. Attendance required. Serious concerns to discuss." My wife read it once, then looked at me with a calm certainty that sent a chill down my back. She's going public. And I knew. The next 24 hours would decide everything. She called the whole neighborhood to judge us, but she didn't know we were coming with the truth. By the time the meeting started, the street looked like a small-town gathering straight out of some courtroom drama. Folding chairs lined the grass in front of our house. People whispered behind their hands, and more neighbors kept trickling in until nearly every porch on the block had someone standing on it. I could feel the weight of their eyes, some confused, some worried, some already convinced of whatever story the HOA president had been spreading. Then she arrived. The HOA president marched into the center of the semicircle wearing her polished navy polo, fake badge clipped proudly to the front, her expression determined and theatrical. She carried a clipboard like it was a judge's gavel, tapping it against her arm for emphasis. "Thank you all for coming," she announced loudly. "We have a serious situation unfolding in our community." Her voice carried across the street, sharp and dramatic, crafted to stir panic. She pointed toward our fence. "This structure is a direct threat to neighborhood safety. It blocks visibility, hides activity, and goes against the spirit of our community rules." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People exchanged uneasy glances. I could feel frustration tightening in my chest. But she wasn't finished. She turned her gaze toward our house, locking eyes with me first, then my wife. "And that's not all," she continued, voice rising. "I've looked into the background of the woman living here. Her job is secretive, unclear, classified. We have every reason to believe she may pose a national security risk." Gasps broke out. Someone whispered, "I knew something was off." My wife stepped forward then, quiet, steady, completely unfazed. "Before you continue," she said, "I have a simple request." The HOA president narrowed her eyes. "And what's that?" "Show us your police badge number." A stillness fell over the crowd. The president's jaw tightened. I'm not required to share sensitive information. But my wife didn't let her finish. She walked to the small table we had set up and tapped a key on her laptop. A projector lit up the portable screen behind her, displaying the official county roster of active law enforcement. This, my wife said, is the list of every officer in this county. She scrolled slowly, deliberately, every name, every badge number. Then she stopped. Notice anything missing? Someone in the crowd whispered, her name isn't there. Another person said, so she lied? The HOA president's face flushed red. That's fake. You forged that. My wife tapped another key. Up came a receipt from an online costume company, clearly showing a purchase of a fake badge shipped to the HOA president's address. Gasps turned into open outrage, and then my wife played the next piece. Surveillance footage of the president snooping near our windows, photographing the fake documents, trespassing into our yard at 5 a.m., followed by an audio clip. We'll get them out before the delivery date. The HOA president's eyes widened. Her composure cracked. She stepped forward, fingers shaking. You don't understand. She's manipulating you. They're the threat, not me. But no one was listening to her anymore. Neighbors backed away from her. Some whispered. Some stared in disbelief. Some folded their arms, finally seeing the truth. Her face twisted with anger, raw, desperate, dangerous. And then, in one horrifying instant, she reached toward her waistband. My breath froze. Because she wasn't reaching for a phone. She was pulling out a gun. She aimed a gun at my wife. That was the moment everything exploded. The world seemed to freeze the instant the HOA president's hand closed around the grip of the pistol. For a breathless second, nobody moved. Not the neighbors, not the kids across the street, not even me. It was as if the entire neighborhood inhaled at once, waiting to see if this nightmare was real or just another bluff. Then she pulled the gun free. People screamed. Folding chairs toppled. Someone shouted, "Get back!" as neighbors scrambled in every direction. The president's hands were shaking so badly I could see the tremor from where I stood. Her eyes were wild now, not angry, not confident, just unhinged. "Everyone stay where you are," she shouted, waving the weapon toward my wife. "You all need to listen to me. You don't understand who she is." But she didn't realize the bigger truth. My wife wasn't frightened. Not even a little. She stepped forward with a calmness that didn't match the chaos around us. "Put the gun down," she said, her voice low, steady, controlled in a way that made even me still inside. "This is your last warning." "You don't get to give warnings," the president screamed. "I know what you're hiding. You think you can expose me? You think you can ruin everything?" Her finger twitched on the trigger. I didn't even have time to shout her name. My wife moved first. It was a blur. One clean, practiced motion. She stepped to the side, closing the distance faster than my eyes could track. Her left hand struck the president's wrist, redirecting the gun upward, while her right hand snapped forward, grabbing the barrel and twisting it with controlled force. The shot rang out like thunder. The sound punched the air so hard my ears rang. A flash burst above the crowd as the bullet tore into the sky instead of into someone's chest. Children screamed, adults ducked, and a few people fell to the ground out of pure panic. But my wife didn't flinch. She kept moving, her body flowing like she had trained for this moment 1,000 times. With a sharp twist and a downward pivot, she pulled the president off balance and forced her onto the grass. In seconds, the woman who had terrorized us for months was face down, arms pinned behind her back. My wife pulled out a pair of black zip ties from her pocket, tightened them around the president's wrists, and kept a knee pressed between her shoulder blades. Neighbors stared in stunned silence, some with awe, some with relief, some finally understanding who the real danger had been. The president struggled against the grass, panting, wild-eyed. "You think this ends with me?" she snarled. "You weren't chosen by accident. You were targeted. From the beginning." That sentence cut through me like a blade. Targeted. Not unlucky. Chosen. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real ones this time. Within moments, two sheriff's deputies sprinted onto the scene, weapons drawn until my wife held up her badge and nodded toward the restrained woman at her feet. She's armed, my wife said simply. She fired one shot. She's going in. The deputies took over, hauling the president to her feet as she continued muttering threats about things we didn't yet understand. They placed her in the back of a patrol car, the door slamming shut with a finality that felt like the end of something, and the beginning of something bigger. I turned to my wife, heart still pounding. Is it over? She shook her head once. Not dramatic, not emotional, just certain. We need backup, she said quietly. Now. And the way she said it made my blood run cold, because whatever was coming next, she already knew it was bigger than both of us. When the task force arrived, I finally saw how big this nightmare really was. It started at sunrise, sirens in the distance, the thud of heavy boots, radios crackling with clipped commands. I stepped onto the porch, still shaken from the night before, and saw more law enforcement vehicles on our street than I'd ever seen in my life. Not just local deputies, federal agents, state investigators. A full joint task force moving with precision and purpose. My wife stood beside them, her badge visible now, her posture completely different from the woman who once wandered this block quietly at dusk. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't blending in. She was leading. Multiple warrants are being served, she told me. Homes tied to her and her associates. Associates, plural. The word made my chest tighten. I watched as agents moved down the street, hitting not just the HOA president's house, but two others. Properties we always assumed belonged to quiet families who kept to themselves. But when the doors opened and uniformed officers poured inside, it became clear. These weren't just neighbors. They were part of the operation. Boxes came out first, labeled, cataloged, then hard drives, laptops, a duffel bag full of badges, uniforms, clipboards, fake authority gear customized for intimidation. One agent lifted a thick binder stuffed with printed reports. He handed it to my wife. This is part of their targeting list, he said. I stepped closer despite the chill in my spine. Page after page contained names, addresses, notes about homeowners, military families, law enforcement families, widows, people who lived alone, people they believed would fold under pressure. It wasn't just disturbing. It was monstrous. These tactics weren't random, my wife said quietly. They were patterned, organized, used over and over across multiple states. The evidence kept growing. Shell companies registered under meaningless acronyms. Dozens of forged HOA letters. Maps with highlighted properties. Financial trails leading straight to out-of-state accounts. Then came the biggest blow. A radio chirped. We got him. Agents exchanged looks. Sharp ones. Ones filled with triumph. I didn't recognize the name they said next, but my wife did. The ringleader, the one behind the entire operation, had been arrested attempting to board a private jet in Nevada. He didn't even get to buckle a seatbelt before agents closed in on him. The neighborhood buzzed with a stunned, nervous energy. People who had avoided us for weeks now stepped onto their lawns, whispering in disbelief as officers moved from house to house collecting evidence. And then, like sharks who smelled blood in the water, the media arrived. Local news vans first, then regional stations, then national outlets. Cameras, microphones, reporters in crisp jackets, all trying to capture the story of the fraudulent HOA network and the takedown that had begun right here, on our quiet street. My wife stood at a small podium the sheriff's office set up, speaking with the same steady authority she'd shown the night before. No one, she said, has the right to intimidate a community for personal gain. If something feels wrong, speak up. That's how we keep neighborhoods safe. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Later, when the reporters left and the street finally began to calm, I walked beside her across our porch. So, I asked softly, is it over now? She didn't answer right away. She stared down the street, past the task force vehicles, past the houses we once thought were harmless, past the last flashing light fading into the distance. Then she exhaled. Not even close. And in that moment, I realized the storm we'd survived was only one part of a much larger fight she already knew was waiting. The danger was gone. Or at least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. In the weeks after the arrests, Oakwood Heights felt like a wounded town trying to learn how to breathe again. People walked a little slower, spoke a little softer, and looked at each other with a mix of relief and embarrassment. Relief that the threat was gone. Embarrassment that so many of them had followed someone wearing a fake badge. But slowly, almost cautiously, trust began to rebuild. The HOA reorganized from the ground up. No more secret meetings on sidewalks. No more vague rules someone invented overnight. Leadership had to be verified. Background checks, references, proper documentation. Positions that implied any kind of authority required real experience, actual credentials, real accountability. It wasn't just a new set of rules. It was a promise that nothing like this would ever happen again. My wife didn't accept any leadership role, despite the neighborhood practically begging her to. Instead, she did something more important. She offered to teach a monthly community safety class. The turnout was small at first, 10 people, maybe 12. But by the third month, the room at the community center was full. Parents brought their kids, teenagers showed up. Even retirees attended, taking notes on spotting scams, recognizing fake authority, understanding when to call law enforcement. Watching her speak in front of those crowds was different from watching her confront the HOA president or lead the task force. There was no tension, no danger, just clarity, guidance, strength. She wasn't just protecting people anymore. She was empowering them. And the neighborhood responded. Children started playing outside again, without parents constantly glancing up and down the street. Neighbors waved like they meant it. Conversations restarted at mailboxes. Cookouts returned. The air felt lighter, as if the shadows that once clung to the place had finally lifted. Even our fence, the same one that started this entire nightmare, became something of a symbol. People who once complained about it now complimented it. Someone even joked that they were thinking about putting up one just like it. To the rest of the neighborhood, it wasn't just metal and posts anymore. It represented standing firm when others tried to break you. Life was healing. Not perfect, but healing. Then the postcard arrived. I found it in our mailbox one crisp morning. Plain white. No return address. The picture on the front showed a quiet suburban street. Not ours, but one that could have been. On the back were only 6 words, handwritten in thin black ink. You stopped one. There are more. My hands went cold. I brought it inside and handed it to my wife. She didn't react outwardly. Not with fear, not with panic. But something in her eyes shifted. A subtle tightening I recognized from the night she first exposed the HOA president. Without a word, she opened a drawer in her office and slid the postcard into a new file folder. She labeled it carefully, almost gently, like someone preparing for a storm they already knew was coming. This goes in its own case, she said, separate from the others. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. But the quiet inside the room felt heavier again, like old shadows returning to reclaim space we thought we'd cleared. Later that week, just as routines finally began to feel normal again, I stepped outside to water the plants near the walkway. That's when I saw it. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. A familiar SUV rolled down our street. Not fast, not reckless, just slowly enough to watch. And in that moment, the peace we'd rebuilt felt suddenly fragile all over again. The neighborhood was quiet again, until the white van slowed down in front of our house. I was on the porch that morning, sipping coffee and trying to convince myself that life had truly returned to normal. Kids were biking past, a neighbor was mowing his lawn, and the breeze carried that warm scent of cut grass and morning sun. It should have felt peaceful. It should have felt safe. But ever since everything happened, I'd learned something important. Peace can be real, but it can also be temporary. Sometimes, it's just the silence before someone makes their next move. My wife stepped outside beside me, her eyes scanning the street the way they always did now. Calm, methodical, observant. She didn't look paranoid. She looked prepared. I'd come to understand that vigilance wasn't fear for her. It was muscle memory. Inside her home office, the case files she'd built over the past month were growing thicker. Lists of names, locations tied to shell companies, suspicious property purchases matching the same pattern we'd uncovered in our neighborhood. She tracked movements across counties, across states, like she was mapping out a puzzle she already knew would matter one day. People like them don't disappear just because one operation got shut down, she told me once. They regroup, they adapt, they look for the next opening. And that morning, as the white van slowed near our curb, I finally understood what she meant. It wasn't the type of vehicle that stood out. It could have belonged to a contractor, a delivery service, or someone just passing through. But the driver didn't act like any of those things. He didn't look at his GPS, or his phone, or the houses around him. He looked at us, longer than any stranger should. My wife shifted slightly, not stepping forward, not stepping back, just repositioning her body in a way that told me she was already cataloging details. License plate, driver description, vehicle model, direction of travel. She didn't need to write anything down. She kept it all stored in that strategic mind of hers. When the van finally rolled away, turning the corner at the end of the block, she didn't speak right away. She just watched until it disappeared. Only then did she exhale. "Someone's checking," she said softly. It wasn't fear that tightened my chest in that moment. It was realization. Even after everything we'd survived, everything we'd exposed, the danger hadn't vanished. It had just gone quiet, patient, waiting for its next opportunity. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I married, the sheriff I hadn't known she was, the protector of this neighborhood, even when they didn't understand why they needed protecting. Strong, steady, always ahead of the storm. "I trust you," I told her, and I meant it with every part of me. She glanced toward the distant street, a faint tension in her jaw. "Stay ready," she said. "This isn't over." I knew then that whatever came next, whatever new threat or lingering shadow, we'd face it the same way we faced everything else. Together. If you've ever dealt with a corrupt HOA, a power-drunk neighbor, or someone who thought a fake badge could scare you into silence, tell your story. And if you want more real cases, more justice, more battles like this one, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Your support keeps these stories alive. Because the people who came for us the first time weren't finished.